Hi, my name's Eric Nathan. I'm composer in residence with the New England Philharmonic, and I'm really excited to be here today with Juhi Bansal, who is one of the Call for Scores finalists. Welcome, Juhi.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm so excited to be a finalist. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, just for our audiences, this is the first in a series of interviews that I'm going to be doing with our Call for Scores finalists, and it's aimed to help um, the NEP bring their work to our audiences and to a broader platform, both sharing recordings of their work and also having these interviews where we can dive deeper into their process and musical worlds. And so these will happen on select Wednesdays through the year, usually at 8 p.m. And you can come via Zoom and participate with questions at the end. And the next one will be December 13th with Xavier Music. So, Juhi, you submitted your piece, Songs from the Deep, and I really love this piece. It really captivated me, and I listened to it many times. And I thought it's quite interesting how beautiful it's very beautiful and also very powerful and intimate at once, these two extremes I felt. And I was very interested how you said it was inspired by whale songs and also ocean currents. So I wonder if you might walk us through how ocean currents and whale song find their way into an orchestral piece.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the environment is one of those things that's very much on my mind, like I think it is for a lot of us. And I'm a diver and I'm a surfer, so you spend a lot of time in the water. One of the things you mentioned about this like very visceral sort of feel of ocean currents, that was one of the things that I've spent a lot of time immersed in that. So wanted to make sure in writing the piece that there was like really a visceral sense of that, not just the ocean as this thing kind of in the distance and abstract landscape, really the powerful feeling of waves and currents and water kind of pulling and pushing and buffeting and swaying. More specifically, this piece, I had had an experience, this is quite a few years ago now. I was diving in Mexico, and I remember it was November, December. It was the season where the humpback whales are kind of passing through to give birth. And I remember so vividly being underwater and you hear all this noise while you're diving. It's like the sounds from fish eating are really loud, much louder than you would think.
Yeah.
And just like water sounds and the sounds of movement. And all of a sudden, off in the distance, you hear these humpback whale songs. And
Wow.
it was so incredible because what you're describing, these two things, that was it. You're hearing kind of this layer of noise and you're being buffeted and moved underwater by the currents as you're listening. And then you hear the song kind of coming like very physically through the water as well.
Mm.
It's fascinating to me, whale song, just how loud it has to be to travel underwater and how much actual like energy and propulsion these sounds have. So it was again this kind of duality of hearing beautiful sound and physically being moved in the water by this sound. So the piece kind of came to be about those two things, about this idea of like water as a layer of, I don't know, filter, noise, movement, something very physical. And then this idea of like really beautiful songs emerging out of that. And just as you said, Eric, those are kind of the two streams that run all the way through the music. You hear in three sections, it's like first a little bit of noise, a little bit of propulsion, and the songs come out of that. And then the same thing, but amplified. And finally, the third time, the same thing, but just immensely amplified.
Mm. Well, it's really wonderful to hear how like such a special moment kind of makes an impact, and then you can find music as a way of unpacking it or maybe living in it longer, understanding it deeper in some way.
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely. I mean, I think environment is such a huge topic, and like, protecting the oceans and doing what we can to not destroy the oceans is something that's so close to my heart. One of the things that's been really exciting about doing exactly what you said, kind of transforming this moment into music, was trying to find a way to put something that's really important to me as far as a cause or a belief,
mm,
but share that with an audience in a way where it's not like, let, you know, do this thing, or I'm not trying to be preachy about it, but just here is something that I think is magnificent and beautiful. And if we can all celebrate it, maybe we can do more to also protect it.
right, absolutely. No, it's a platform but also ways for us to feel it
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, talking about feelings, so at the very beginning of the piece, I found it very striking, and there's almost, you feel it in the floor, this rumbling of a rush, these string chords that just kind of rush out, which people can listen to in the recording. And this is paired then with a higher sound, and gradually this rushing dies down, and we get this beautiful melody above. And as you said, this section comes back a few times, and I was thinking like it comes back in waves too. Uh, so I'm wondering how you thought about this rushing sound versus the melody. And I know in the score you mentioned that it's a Hindustani melody, and wonder how that is functioning in your music and in this piece.
Sure. It's something I'm still trying to figure out how I marry the two elements. I mean, my training is all in Western classical music, but I grew up listening to Hindustani classical music, although I did start studying that much more seriously in the last few years. So this piece was in some ways kind of a turning point in me finding a way to bring those two languages together, and that although it is in many ways a very traditional Western classical piece, and I do use the word traditional somewhat loosely. There's things like it's not a very harmonic piece in that there's basically a G drone that runs all the way through it, start to end, which is not, when we think about harmony in a Western perspective, harmony is such a huge part of what we do. You like modulate and you change keys and you use chords for tension, you use chords for release. This piece is not doing that at all, really. There's a little bit of movement. That idea of the static drone for me came from Hindustani music. And then there's kind of like the sections that are more about noise, those are exploring some of the like contemporary string techniques, the colors that you can get out of violins and violas and cellos, kind of the duality you can get between plucking out these quartets, so a small number of strings contrasted with the larger body of string instruments you have in your orchestra. And then those moments that are whale sung, there's probably a version of this piece that exists somewhere written by some other composer where the whale song is really trying to very actively sound exactly like whale song. To me, I thought it was more powerful rather than just trying to copy it, because I would tell you then to just go listen to recordings of humpback whale song if that's what you want to hear. There's no way an instrument could copy that exactly, so I think it's worth appreciating the original. But I thought in this idea of trying to evoke melodies that are otherworldly, that are powerful, that are beautiful, I could lean into my musical heritage and my other musical language, which is Hindustani music, which tends to have this like very intricate ornamentation and like these very fluid movements between notes, which is not what we tend to do in Western classical music. So in that way, it's kind of a marriage or a juxtaposition of the two. There's sections that are very Western classical in their kind of organization, and then other sections that are purely leaning into what I like to do with Hindustani music as well.
Well, it becomes a personal response to this moment, and you're abstracting it in some way that we can lend various meanings into it too, and find your own personal meaning into it. So yeah, you've talked a little bit about how the idea finds its way into the gestures and the textures and the concept of the piece. I wonder if you could share a little bit with us, how do you actually start composing a piece? How do you find yourself in the middle? So I see there's a piano behind you and some different colored papers stick to the score. What is your process like?
I mean, if I'm honest, it's chaos at the beginning because with every new piece, I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing when I'm starting out from scratch. This one, it helped me to have this very powerful image, everything we've been talking about, because it kind of gave me a structure that I was building on. I don't know if you've seen my site, actually, this piece, it was commissioned as part of a project called Sound Investment, done by the Oregon Mozart Players.
Yes.
And what was interesting about that is that I had to go and tell people about the piece even while I was writing it. So before I had written a note, I needed to go present to a number of donors and board members that this is what the piece is going to be, which is never my process really. And then kind of halfway through, I had to do the same thing. I'm halfway through writing the piece. I haven't orchestrated anything yet, but this is what the piece is going to be. So because of that, I have, and you can see it on my website if anybody's curious, like diagrams and graphs and sketches of what the piece might turn into, which I don't always do, but in this case, I did for this particular piece since I was showing it to people and I wanted to keep the ideas not just in here, but actually out in a physical way that I could share.
Yeah.
So for this one, it started with, you mentioned these like wave gestures. There's 3 big wave gestures that I sketched out, and I was thinking about, okay, the first one was going to be a little shorter, second one a little larger, second one a little larger. So then sketching out this idea of like there was going to be not a very exciting harmonic progression, and that, I mean, I think it's beautiful, but it's not particularly complex. That happens the first time in the first wave, and then we get that same progression faster with a few more chords the second time, and that same progression still faster and with a lot more chords the third time. So kind of starting harmonically, then sketching some melodies, and it is, I will admit, complete chaos. It's back and forth between this keyboard and the piano in the other room and some sketches, and a lot of like editing and editing and editing and editing as I go.
Yeah. Yeah, well, sometimes these external pressures can yield very wonderful creative results that we may not anticipate.
Like Stravinsky with his dulcimer, right?
Oh, what about the, I'm not sure.
Well, later on in his career, Stravinsky forced himself to always write on the dulcimer as a
Oh,
like
wow.
artificial constraint because it was not his instrument. And exactly what you're talking about, it forced him to like think in directions, creative directions that maybe otherwise he wouldn't have gone. And he wrote some magnificent music doing that.
Oh, wow. I should try some other instruments. Uh, well, I guess as we close, just going back even further, I wonder if you could share with us how you first wanted to become a composer. What drew you to writing music?
That is a great question. I admit it was film scores. When I was in high school applying for college, I thought I was going to be John Williams, and that was kind of, I went to high school in Hong Kong. I had not really been immersed in any kind of musical culture in a sense. I'm not from a musical family. So my whole experience of composition and writing music at the time was through film. It's like, this is, if you're a composer these days, I thought that is what you do. And I remember I got into USC for my undergraduate degree, and showing up the first week and just being completely blown away with like even just the world of contemporary music. I didn't know that existed before kind of throwing myself into the deep end of it a little bit. um and then of course I fell in love with it, and now it's become what I do. But I have to admit, I still have a soft spot for film because of how many people it brings into the world of music.
Yeah, no, it's I've been teaching it now at Brown where I teach, and it really unlocks different voices from the students when they respond to the films. So I'd love to open it up if there are any questions from the audience for Juhi. Here's a question. What are you working on now?
2 projects, both of which no, 3 projects, all of which I'm desperately racing deadlines on. I've been writing a lot more orchestra music, I'm excited to say. So finishing up a piece for Dusseldorf Symphony and one for the Virginia Symphony. And then the Prototype Festival, and Beth Morrison Project also commissioned an opera. Super excited about all of them, and trying to write as fast as I can to make them all happen before they're due.
Oh, what is your opera topic, or is it under wraps?
No, it's not at all under wraps. I'm working on a concise way to explain this, but basically the theme is about women's stories and women histories and how they tend to get lost over time. So the opera is set in a fictional world where the stars, it's always night, and the night sky is always lit by stars. And we follow this family of women who have a song that keeps the stars alight. And the crux of the story is that the mother dies before she can pass on this song to her daughter, so the daughter goes on a journey to try to rediscover and rebuild this song, to bring the stars back into light.
And when is it being premiered?
We have the first workshop this coming February. I think we're tentatively looking at 25, 26. for a LA, New York premiere, but details still to be finalized.
Very exciting. Well, we'll keep us posted and hope we can hear it when it's all done. Well,
Thanks
thank
so
you
much.
so much for joining me, and look forward to hearing this music. Oh, we do actually have one more question. With your interest in film, I wonder if you thought about adding a visual element to the whale song work.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to. I will admit I'm picky about whale footage because these days there's so much absolutely incredible whale footage. I need to find a collaborator who'd be keen to go get some of that so we could put together something that, again, like wanting to keep that really visceral nature of it so that you feel like you're surrounded by that rather than just kind of seeing it off in the distance as an abstract. But yes, I would love to. And I have a number of other projects. There's one in particular that's a short operatic film inspired by the story of the Bangladesh Girls Surf Club, where there is actually exactly what you're describing, a visual element. And I worked with a filmmaker we got a lot of underwater footage, we got a lot of overwater footage, and I'd love to do so much more of that.
Well, it'd be great to see that comes to be. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you, Jennifer, for the question as well.